It's my special pleasure, though, to be here tonight as the chairman of the Progressive Liberal Party and to welcome all of you to this meeting. And it is especially a proud moment to be able to join the former representative and my colleague. We've traversed the Bahamas together from south to north over many, many years. And it's always good to be back here in West End. And so I'm pleased at the large crowd that has come to greet us here tonight and to show us this is still PLP country. I want to address something which I think is quite important in terms of our own identity. A few minutes ago, I talked about the fact that the whole program of the Free National Movement was to make the PLP feel that it was useless, that it was corrupt, that it was finished, and that it is a party of the past. That was their whole campaign. They've done a number of things since they came to office to try and project that. One is they took a number of our former members of parliament and brought them before the courts. That is still playing out as we see, but anyone who sees the evidence that is coming out now in the first of those cases understands what is really happening. So we shall see how that comes out, and we believe and hope that justice will prevail at the end of the day. But that was part of the program. And the program continues. During last week, the Nassau Guardian wrote an editorial. And in that editorial, it said that the PLP was attempting to make a comeback. And the PLP was attempting to fool the people that they were a different organization from they were before. The people must not be fooled, and the PLP must be rejected by the people of the country. Now, unfortunately, many people who are PLP seem to have adopted that narrative, to have accepted the propaganda by the other side that in the 5 years we were in office, the PLP did nothing. I'm telling you tonight that that is an impossibility. That if you actually look at the facts, you will see that there's a record of accomplishments by the Progressive Liberal Party over the past 5 years. And I'm going to take you through some of them tonight. I'll start off with this story. Sometime 6 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, there was a videotape which I saw of a motivational speech by a man named Sebastian and Les Brown. Thousands, hundreds, if not thousands of people were asked to come to Paradise Island to listen to this motivational address by these two men. They're two successful people, and they have a success story to tell. Interesting material. But what I was interested in was the interviews that were done with some of the young people who were there. Because what Sebastian was doing that night was he has something called the Island Luck Foundation. And the Island Luck Foundation is giving grants to people so they can start businesses. I think the grants are $10,000 a piece. Some are as high as $25,000. And one by one, these people came up to the microphone and they said, thanks to Sebastian and Island Luck Foundation for giving us these grants so that we can start our business. And they explained how it is so difficult to get capital to start businesses, and this was a wonderful thing that the Island Luck Foundation was doing. And I agree, it's a wonderful thing. But I'm a politician, and I was thinking of the backstory. How did the Island Luck Foundation get to exist? And how did the Island Luck Foundation get to be able to give those grants to those people? Remember, one of the pastors in my area came to me and said that the reason that the Progressive Liberal Party lost the last general election because it was being punished, his words, said the Lord came to him and told him we were being punished because we reversed the referendum result on gambling. And therefore, the PLP had to be punished for making that decision. So anyway, the decision, as you know, the referendum was what it was, and we had to reverse that decision. We had to reverse that decision for good and cogent reasons. Number one, Commissioner of Police came to us and said, the cost of closing down gambling in the Bahamas would be so prohibitive, it made it almost impossible. The cost of closing down gambling in the Bahamas would have been prohibitive and made it impossible. Secondly, there was too much revenue outside the formal economy, which, since we couldn't close it down, the government needed to find a mechanism to capture that revenue and bring it into the formal economy. And what did we do? Your former member of parliament was the minister responsible for gaming. And legislation was crafted to bring gaming formally into the economy. 3,500 people were working in that sector. 3,500 people. I think we get something like $40 million in revenue from gaming annually and counting. Okay, so the preacher says we were punished. But you know, that night, I said to myself, looking at that audience, the hundreds, as I said, if not thousands of people sitting in that audience, I wonder if, as they said thank you and how grateful they were for this money that had been donated to them, I wonder how many of them connected the fact that they were able to get those funds to a decision made by the Progressive Liberal Party. You think anybody thought about that night? They were probably, many of them were probably on the streets during the campaign saying the PLP was crooked, the PLP was corrupt, the PLP had to go, the PLP did nothing. But that decision, those monies they received that night was possible, made possible by a decision of your Progressive Liberal Party. And that's just one small example of how the people who tell the story can change your views about what you think of something. Never pretend that your perceptions of what things are not colored by the person who tells the story. So if every day the Nassau Guardian, the Tribune, and their radio stations are telling you that national health insurance is bad for you. Can you imagine that? National health insurance, which would find a way for people to pay for their health care without having to go to cookouts and begging people on the streets for monies to pay for their health care, was turned into a negative story by those telling the story. National health insurance. Who can be against national health insurance? And yet, these people were elected on a platform of being against national health insurance. And since they've come to office, notwithstanding the fact that national health insurance has been started, you have your card, you can go to your primary care doctor, the care is free, you just flash the card, the care is free, that's already started. They have put a stop to national health insurance and its development. And people cheered for that and voted for that last year in 2017. How is that possible? I'll tell you how it's possible. $100 million of your good tax money are now spent paying for the health insurance of all those who are in the uniform branches of the public service. So remember, PLP decided to give insurance to policemen, immigration officers, prison officers, the nurses. All of this is paid for by the government. No contribution made by any public servant. Do you know how much that amounts to every year? $100 million. And this $100 million, those dollars, are managed by a company called Kalina. So, Shane Gibson told me, the former minister, that Kalina gets 25% of what they manage as their fee for managing the fund. So, if that is correct, that means off $100 million, how much do they get every year? 25% of 100 is $25 million. So they make $25 million, if I'm correct, off managing that $100 million of insurance every year. Let's connect this dot. Who owns the Nassau Guardian? Who owns the Nassau Guardian? The same person who owns Kalina owns the Nassau Guardian. So, is it any surprise then that the Nassau Guardian would be against national health insurance? Because if national health insurance comes into being, that means that Kalina is going to lose the $25 million, which they get annually. So every day, they're beating the bushes. National health insurance is bad. National health insurance is bad. They can always find someone in some bush somewhere who will come out and say, national health insurance is bad. And they told that story over and over again, to the point where people actually voted for it. They said that we were borrowing the country into debt. Remember that? So much debt. And since they've been in office, what have they done? $1.7 billion in a year. $1.7 billion in a year. But here's what we did. Remember how they were boasting last year after the hurricane, how they were able to airlift the people from the southern Bahamas and bring them up to the capital to escape the hurricane. Remember that? Yes. Which planes did they use? They used the planes from Bahamas Air. Where did those planes come from? The PLP made a decision to borrow $100 million to buy 5 new planes. Those old planes were breaking down. The PLP made a decision. We were able to make a decision without adding to the national debt. By how? Go into the French. The French company said, we'll give you a mortgage over the planes. We'll take an assignment off the ticket money. And that's how the money is being paid back, without requiring to go to Parliament and get a sovereign guarantee. That's what the PLP did. 5 brand new planes. And last year, they were able to boast off that same borrowed money. They was able to boast how they were able to airlift people from the southern Bahamas to Nassau to save them from the last hurricane that came. That's what the PLP did. Go back to another story. What about BAMSI? Anyone know what BAMSI is? It's a big farm. By their reckoning, the Progressive Liberal Party spent $80 million investing in and around BAMSI in North Andros. Hundreds of new jobs. Infrastructure put in throughout the island, through the north of the island. And yet, in 2017, people were persuaded to vote against the Progressive Liberal Party because they said, and they were able to convince people, that BAMSI was a burnt-out building. Remember that? Every day you open your newspaper, all you saw about BAMSI was a building had burned down. But just last week, there was a graduation at BAMSI. A new set of farmers have been trained. And BAMSI was designed to deal with issues like food security. Those of you who remember 2001, remember the ports in the United States after 9/11 were closed down for 2 weeks. And this country started to run out of food. And suddenly people realized that we have to have our own food security. When I first came home in 1974, this country was self-sufficient in pork. Today, we don't even produce 10% of what we need. It was self-sufficient in eggs. Today, I don't know how many we produce, if any. self-sufficient, almost self-sufficient in chicken. I don't know how many, at least the birds. I don't know how many we produce this day. But we've gone backwards in agriculture. So the PLP decided we had to make a real stab at this. They did some research, and they discovered what are the things you need to grow. They went and asked people, if you come, tourists, they come and ask tourists, when you come to the Bahamas, when you come to an island paradise, what is it that you expect to see when you come to an island paradise? People said coconut trees, except no coconut trees in the Bahamas. So if you go to Bamsey today, there are miles and miles of coconut trees. They're growing them. Anybody who wants to stock up their yard with coconut trees can go to Bamsey and buy the coconut trees. At one point, we used to know Long Island as a place you could go and get mutton. But in the last 30 years, the stock has gone right down to zero. So they imported new goats, new sheep, brought them into Bamsey. Any farmer today who wants to make his stock better can go to Bamsey, get a goat, get a sheep, and improve your stock. That's Bamsey. They asked the Bahamian population, when you eat boiled fish on a Saturday morning, what do you have with your boiled fish? They said, we need limes. But you know, the lime groves have been destroyed across the country. So if you want lime trees today, you can go to Bamsey and get your stock improved of limes to improve the stock in your yard. That's what the PLP did. And is training farmers at the same time. It's not a burnt out building. And it is a project which must be continued because we need food security. But they were able to convince people that that was a negative, and people voted against the PLP because they said Bamsey was a burnt out building. So I come to the big one now. You can't believe your ears, can you? When you hear Dionisio de Aguilar, the Minister of Tourism, boasting about the tourism figures. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? The man who was on his feet saying that the people who bought Bahama were crooks. And you couldn't, the now Prime Minister says it wasn't a real project. It was fake. It was a fake opening. He didn't come to the opening. Said when he got in power, he was going to sell Bahama. Although we couldn't figure out how you're going to sell something that you don't own. He said it was a secret deal. When they got to office, found out no secret deal. Everything was completely out in the open. 5,000 people now work at Bahama. 5,000. 5,000. And these are young people that have jobs that they wouldn't have had if the PLP had not made a decision to fight for Bahama. And the irony of that whole story is some of the people who are working on the project, most of them, many of them, given the outturn of the election, voted for the FNM and believed the mistruths, the untruths, and distortions and deceptions that were told with regard to that project. They're boasting about how the airport has had more people going through the Lynden Pindling Airport in the history of the airport. Why do they think that is? Because of the new hotel rooms. Who was the Minister of Tourism when that happened? Amen. No? What, you know, the minister, I think he was in the newspaper today saying that the first quarter of the year has just been remarkable in tourism. Why does he think that is? You know, they're cutting a ribbon for a place opposite the office of Prime Minister for a new hotel. The man, Paul Wynne. Why do they think that is? Who do you think approved that? And on and on and on. But they were able to convince people that Bahama was a bad deal. So tonight, I just want you to think about those things and to think about what we actually tried to do to bring the country to where it is today. Now, we ourselves have some work to do. There's no question about that. We have to, and I just witnessed this because I just come from Barbados, where you see the result was 30-0 for the new prime minister. And it was real deja vu for me because the side that lost wears yellow t-shirts and the side that won wears red t-shirts. So, you know, that was a painful experience yet again. Even though the new prime minister is my friend. But to see yellow go down in flames and red up again. But you know, that's Barbados business, not mine. But watching them on the platform, the yellow t-shirts on the platform, and they were saying the same things to people that we said. We brought the country to independence. We created the modern Barbados. We created the institutions of the state. And when we went down the road to the rally of the Reds, all the young people were there, all the older people were where the yellow t-shirts are. So we have work to do. And the question is, you know, they say, and I'm going to do the analysis here because I'm sure it can't be any different here, but 40% of the population of Barbados is over 50. Now, we always talk about the percentage of the population that's under 35. But I tell people, I remember, in my last successful campaign, if it weren't for the grandmothers and grandfathers who were retired, getting their pensions, didn't have to be afraid of Ingram and the FNM, who manned the phones, who worked the phones, and the only thing they said to us, when you all get to power, make sure you take care of my grandchildren. That's what they did. And so, all of us, it's not about the young, it's not about the old, it's about the party applying itself to provide for the people of this country. And that's what we pledge to do. So we're working hard with every group. And a couple of things are being done. First, I want you to make note of a special convention which is being held on the 28th of July in Nassau, one day. It's going to be at Holy Trinity Hall to deal with proposed amendments to the Constitution. One day, the 28th of July, Holy Trinity Hall in Nassau. The actual annual General Convention, when we have elections and all those things, will take place in October as usual. But this special convention, one day on the 28th of July, and I hope all those who are stalwart councillors, you are obviously delegates to the convention. Those who were elected, we are seeking the approval of the National General Council to approve those who were delegates at the last convention to continue to be delegates for this special convention. That's subject to the next NGC meeting. So please keep a note of that date, 28th of July, Nassau at Holy Trinity Hall for the special convention to deal with the Constitution. Secondly, the Candidates Committee has been appointed, and the Leadership Council and the Council has determined that in order for everyone, with the exception of the 4 people who are members of Parliament now, everyone else will have to run through what we call a module or a course, and this includes me. So I have to take it myself, even though I'm one of the teachers. So what do you think I can give myself when I mark the paper? But anyway, the idea is so that we don't run into the Andre Rollins, Greg Moss problem, where you're going to get people, there are lots of people who are lining up who want to run for the Progressive Liberal Party. What we want to do is to make sure that everybody is aware of some basic fundamentals. The history of the party, history of our country, the institutions which govern the country, and how they relate. How do you perform as a backbencher? How do you work as a minister of the government? What happens when you join the cabinet? What is your responsibility as a candidate? How do you raise funds for a campaign? What's the responsibility for the Progressive Liberal Party, and what is your responsibility as an individual member of the party? So those will be run through over a period of 4 days. And we hope that we'll have wide participation in it from the 20th to the 24th of June in Nassau, and we will be bringing it to Grand Bahama as well. So people who are interested in doing it. And it's not only for people who want to be candidates, it's also for people who want to be campaign managers, who want to work in local government at one point. For example, what I was telling people is, you know, this new ethics act that the government proposes, they're going to force people who are even local government councillors to publicly disclose their income, assets, and liabilities. Do you believe that? So when you agree to serve on statutory boards, when you agree to be in local government, you're going to be subject to the same things that members of parliament and senators have to do. And that is going to cause, we're going to be raising a fuss about this in some mechanisms because we think this is imposing too much of a cost on people. But all of this is coming. So we all need to be singing from the same hymn sheet. And we're attempting to put in place these measures for reform. So those are some of the things we're doing tonight. I certainly will be checking into this thing about the administration building in Bimini. I'm surprised because when I had spoken to the contractor, I thought the building was all but finished. But you know, it's the same story. The firehouse is finished, but the fire engines are not in the firehouse. And they can't say why. You know, look, what are they waiting on? Oh, furniture, I see. Well, I'm sure Mr. Roll, what's Don's place name? The furniture store? Yeah, Dolly Madison. He could lend them some furniture. You need any beds? You know, I'm sure he'd give them a break from Dolly Madison. But, so that's where we're going down the road. It's a real pleasure to see all of you out here this evening. I apologize again for the absence of the leader and the deputy leader. I want you, though, to think about those things, think about this. The former leader used to say, until lions have their authors, the tale of the hunt is always told from the point of view of the hunter. And the hunter, so far, is telling our story. We do not have to believe that story. We know what the truth is. The truth is, we did a lot of good work. And nobody should persuade us otherwise. So thank you all tonight, and PLP all the way.
Just want to, before you leave tonight, let's hear it for the chairman of our great party.